She's got her fellow passenger, or her fellow... And there were parts I liked, but there were parts that I just didn't, and that was that. Dark and messed up. I was like, oh, you know, the Wrong Family wasn't dark and messed up enough for me. And I have the first episode saved. Who cares, right? Who cares? Nobody cares. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today we're going to talk about all the books I read in January, and I'm happy to say I had a really good reading month. Even though it started a little slow, I wound up reading some great books. I ended the month with an old favorite. I picked up a book I never in a bazillion years would have predicted I would have read, and I pulled like a book off my shelf that I've been meaning to read for years. So let's just jump right into all the books. So I did do a mid-month wrap-up, and I will link that for you guys in case you haven't seen it, but super quick. I read / listened to The Wrong Family by Tarryn Fisher. It was my first Tarryn Fisher book. I didn't love it. Like, it was fine. I wanted it to be darker and more messed up. I kind of saw what was coming, and there were parts of it that felt a little bit familiar to me. So not my most favorite in the entire world. But then I followed that up with No Exit by Taylor Adams, which has been on my list forever. And I talked about that in my Snowy Reads video also. And it's funny, a couple books I read were from my Snowy Reads video. And it's just, 'tis the season. But if you want a like edge of your seat, claustrophobic, dark and messed up, I was like, oh, you know, The Wrong Family wasn't dark and messed up enough for me. No Exit is dark and messed up, and way more than I thought it was going to be. Way more than I thought it was going to be. So I enjoyed it. It's definitely like a degree of suspension of disbelief, and just commit to the fact that it's insane and you should be in good shape. So that was No Exit. And then I listened to Badass Habits by Jen Sincero, which I enjoyed. I did the audiobook of that. I am in a major self-help, self-improvement, nonfiction-y kind of kick right now, and I read her original book, You Are a Badass, which I love. I talked about it in my other video. Self-help to me is like, it's a lot of the same information packaged different ways, but I very much enjoy her style and her voice, and it is a book that I will revisit down the road. So I did, like I said, I audiobooked it from my library, and I really enjoyed it. And then I'm in the process of reading Claim Your Power by Mastin Kipp. I didn't talk about this in my other video. I don't think I did, but this is a 40-day journey. So I'm not done with it yet. I'm literally doing one day at a time, as you're supposed to. It says a 40-day journey to dissolve the hidden trauma that's kept you stuck and finally thrive in your life's unique purpose. This is a lot. This forces you to go deep. There's been a lot of tears this month doing this. You journal, there's prompts. It really forces you to dig deep into your past, things that are holding you back, all of it. It's heavy, it's a lot. I'm very much enjoying it. Haven't finished it yet, so I've got, let me see, today is gonna be day 30, so I've got 10 more days to go. So I will give you guys a full review in February on that one. In my mid-month checkup, I was in the middle of reading White Ivy by Susie Yang, so this is where we're gonna start today. So White Ivy is a story about Ivy Lynn, who is a Chinese-American immigrant who moves to the US when she is 5 years old. And her parents already live in Massachusetts. They were kind of establishing their life. And Ivy has been raised by her grandmother. And I talked about this in the first recap as well. But like the opening line is, Ivy Lynn is a thief and a liar, but you'd never know it by looking at her. So already we know that we're in for a ride with Ivy. And this book has been compared to The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I wasn't quite sure where that parallel was going to come, but I can see where that comparison is coming from, in the sense that Ivy is someone who is sort of desperate for more. Her parents live in this low-income housing. She has a lot of judgments about her parents, the choices they made. She has a very complicated relationship with her mother. And Ivy she wants to assimilate. She wants wealth. She wants notoriety. She wants sort of the perfect man on her arm. And Ivy spends kind of her whole life looking for it and working towards it. And when she was a teenager, she had this massive crush on the golden boy in school, Gideon Speyer, who's like the son of a senator, fabulous, perfect family, all the things. And many years later, I want to say Ivy's like 28 years old, she has a chance encounter with Gideon's sister, meets Gideon again, and all of a sudden it's like all eyes on the prize. And it is as much a story of her, you know, trying to win Gideon and fit into his life, as it is about Gideon's family, who kind of have motives of their own for encouraging Gideon to partner with Ivy. And then, of course, we have somebody from Ivy's past who comes in and just messes the whole thing up. But Ivy is, like, she's complicated and she's manipulative and she's complex, but she's also yearning to belong and figuring herself out and being sort of forced to confront these preconceived notions she had about not just Gideon's family, but her own. So it's a really, like, interesting story about family dynamics, you know, kind of what you think you know being turned on its head, the facade that you see that people put on for the world and what's really going on behind it, what people's motives are, and sort of very in a Tom Ripley way, the lengths that you will go to get what you want in the world and not let anything stand in your way. So Ivy is definitely a woman on a mission, eyes on the prize, and nothing's going to stop her. But she also makes some pretty bad decisions. She makes some choices that you're like, girl, no. But it just makes her more interesting and more kind of fascinating to read about. So I really enjoyed this. This is a debut novel. I've listened to a few podcasts with Susie Yang, and I really enjoy hearing her story and, you know, her writing of this and her thoughts on Ivy as a character. So highly recommend this book. It piqued my interest when I heard about it, and it did not disappoint. The next book is one that has literally been on my shelf for years, since it came out, because I was so excited and had to have it, right? And it is The Flight Attendant by Chris Bajolian. And no good excuse why I haven't picked up this book, because it's got all the things that I like. It's unreliable narrator, it's murder, it's mystery, it's complicated people, it's messed up people doing messed up things. And I finally read it, and I'm so happy that I did. And I will say I was a little bit worried as I started to get into it that it was going to be just sort of the alcoholic, blackout, drunk, unreliable narrator trope, and there wasn't going to be anything fresh and unique. And in all fairness, this did come out a couple years ago, but it did have kind of that Girl on a Train vibe to it, which, by the way, I loved Girl on a Train. This came out in 2018. And this wound up taking a turn, which I was very excited about, and it was not that typical book in so many ways. So this book is about Cassie Bowden, who is a flight attendant, and her life is basically traveling to interesting countries, having these crazy adventures, binge drinking, meeting men, going home with them, sometimes blacking out, and having sort of these crazy, dangerous encounters. And to date, she has been fine in the sense that nothing bad has happened to her. But when the book opens, she wakes up in a hotel room in Dubai, and the man who was a passenger on her flight from Paris, who she spent the night with, is dead. And not just like a little dead, like throat slit dead, like dead, like blood everywhere dead. And she has no idea what happened. And she panics, as one is apt to do. And because she binge drank and she's taking a look at this room, which is completely destroyed, and she knows that while she can kind of be an angry drunk and kind of fall off tables and say some really horrible things to people, she doesn't necessarily think she's a violent drunk, but she's kind of not sure if she killed this guy. So she flees. So this is the story of what happens after Cassie flees the scene and basically lies to everyone. The FBI, her coworkers, the police, everything. And she just finds herself in more and more trouble and unable to untangle the lies, and tries to drown out her pain by drinking some more. And it's just, it took turns that I wasn't expecting and I was happy about. So you get two perspectives in this book. You're not quite sure where things are. You're not quite sure sort of who was the man that she was with. Was he who he said he was? And it's a crazy ride. And I really enjoyed it. So I know this is, I want to say an HBO show now. They did a free weekend like a month ago when the first episode came out. So I have the first episode recorded, which I'm going to watch. And I don't have HBO, but we'll just, we'll see what I think of it. But I feel like the show kind of made it seem like a comedy, and like, there's nothing funny about this. Like, it's definitely a dark book, and she's a dark character, and you know, I mean, she's covering up a murder, basically. So she does some bad things. So she's unlikable in all the ways. But I enjoyed it. I'm glad I finally read it. I did a bunch of it on audiobook as well. The audiobook narration was really good. We are in Dubai, we're in Paris, we're in Italy, we're in Manhattan. So she's definitely kind of like jet setting all over the place. I really liked the atmosphere. I liked the descriptions of the places. You felt like you were in the different cities, and I thought it was just really well done. So glad I finally read it. I think I already said that, but yeah, definitely a good read. The next book I listened to, and it's called Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. And I heard about this from Allie with Books, and I want to say it was like one of, if not her favorite book of 2020. I will link Allie's channel down below if you guys are not already watching her, because she's got some great recommendations. And what she had said about this book, which is the thing that I was like on it, is she said if you like Sadie, you will love this, and this is better than Sadie. I loved Sadie, so I was like, better than Sadie, I'm in. So one thing I will say is, if you haven't read Sadie, that is half podcast, half sort of, I hate to use the term adventure. Sadie's sister has been murdered, and she is on the quest to find the murderer. And then Sadie herself goes missing. So there's a podcast trying to find Sadie, true crime podcast. So we get dual timelines, dual perspectives, and I loved it. I listened to the audiobook of that. It was incredibly well done. The podcast was so on point. So I thought that this was going to have a podcast element to it, and it doesn't, but that's fine. But just know that going in. So the reason why I did the audiobook is I thought there was going to be a podcast, but the audiobook was also really well done. As I've talked about this before, there are some audiobooks which I completely connect with because the person doing the narration, the inflection in their voice, whether it is turn of phrase or a painful moment or a happy moment, really just sets the story into sort of a different direction for me, or makes me feel things that I don't necessarily know that I would have felt on the page. This book is gut-wrenching, really painful, just really, like, I just wanted to like come through my headphones and hug Claudia, our main character. So Claudia's best friend Monday has gone missing, and Claudia has spent the summer at her grandmother's house, and she is, I want to say 13 years old. And she comes back the day before school starts. They're in 8th or 9th grade, I want to say. And she had called Monday, and there's no answer at Monday's phone. She goes to school, Monday doesn't show up. She doesn't show up the next day. She doesn't show up the next day. And like, Claudia just knows something's wrong because she hasn't heard from her all summer, and she's desperate to find her friend. And she doesn't know why nobody else is desperate to find Monday. And I read an interview with Tiffany D. Jackson afterwards, and she talked about how this is sort of loosely based on some actual crimes that happened. I think one in DC and one somewhere else, dang. And the book is set in DC, but it's a story about how when Black girls go missing, nobody notices, is basically what her feeling is. And Monday has been gone for months, and nobody can remember the last time they saw her. Nobody knows where she is. And when Claudia goes to talk to her mother, she can't get a straight answer. And then Monday's sister, April, isn't giving her a straight answer, and stories are conflicting, but the police aren't concerned, and the teachers kind of haven't really noticed. And Claudia is just devastated and doesn't know where her best friend is. And we get this story in dual timelines, so we do get to see Claudia and Monday as friends. And I feel like the difference between, there's a lot of differences between this and Sadie, but you really understand the connection between the two girls, and you start to get to know Monday. So it's not just Claudia out looking for her friend that we have no connection to. You as the reader really start to build this connection to Monday. You also start to get to see the people in her life and start to wonder what could have happened to her, and then secrets that have happened the year before start to come out. And it just, I was not prepared for sort of how emotional of a read this book was going to be. And also what was interesting in the article that I read, she talked about how one of the many things that inspired her to write this book was the Serial podcast about Adnan Syed and the murder of Hae Min Lee, his girlfriend, back in, I want to say, 1999. And I've talked about that on here too, because I was the last person on the planet to listen to Serial, and I just listened to it a few months ago. I bought the book. I watched the documentary. I found it all just very fascinating about the justice system and everything that happened. But she said the thing about that story that really resonated with her as the author is how it was all about his innocence and not about Hae Min Lee. And it's how girls are used as the props in the missing persons case. And we don't talk about their families, and we don't talk about the impact that when somebody goes missing has. And to really explore that and give a voice to the victim, I highly recommend this book. I just sort of know going in, it's super heavy for sure, but at the same time, just extremely powerful. I really enjoyed her writing. I enjoyed her style. And I already picked up Grown, which I'm really curious to read as well. And I've heard great things about that already, but this was a really good book. And I really enjoyed, from a writing perspective, how she played with the timelines and like how the book was set up. And we get a ton of Claudia's family as well, and her parents, you know, trying to support her and trying to be there for her, but at the same time, you know, not wanting Claudia to get completely lost in her quest to find Monday, and how Claudia tries to move on in the present day. So it's just, it's a lot, but in a really good way. It was really, really good. Okay, now we need to talk about my favorite book of the month, which I did not see coming at all. And I never in a million years would have predicted this is gonna be my favorite book. But it's Lore by Alexandra Bracken. And this is a book that I started to see in a bunch of booktubers' book hauls. And I don't know whose video it was, but it was sort of pitched as like Hunger Games with Greek gods, which my antenna went up a little bit. And then I started to read a little bit about it, and I saw that my library had the ebook of it. So I was like, I'm on it. I need to know. I need to know. I'm curious. I need to know. And about 30 pages in, I was like, and I'm on Amazon, and I'm buying the book because I need it and I want it, and here we go. And I loved this book so much. So much. So many things to talk about, but I'm going to try and keep it vague, because I feel like you need to go in blind and you just need to go for the ride again. It's kind of like in that mystery thriller way where I don't want to know too much, but this is what you need to know. So this book takes place in modern day Manhattan, but its history goes all the way back to Zeus and his children and the original Greek gods. And he has created this event, if you will, called the Agon, as a punishment for a rebellion that happened ages and ages and ages ago. And every 7 years for 7 days, the 9 Greek gods become mortal and they can be hunted. And they are hunted by the descendants of ancient bloodlines. And whoever kills them takes their power. So you have all of their power, but the hitch is at the next Agon, you become mortal and then people are out to get you. So there's your sort of Hunger Games survival of the fittest. And we follow a girl named Lore, and she is the last descendant of one of those hunting bloodlines. And her entire family was murdered after the last Agon. And she just has kind of been out of the game, so to speak, trying to escape it all, doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And she is trying to just live her life. She's 17 years old. And she comes home one night with her friend and roommate, and on her front stoop is Athena, bleeding and asking for her help. And despite Lore's best intentions and desire to have nothing to do with this, she is sucked right back in. And I have to say, it took me a little bit to get into it, in the sense that, like, I don't read a lot of fantasy. Like, I had to find my fantasy legs. And one of the reasons I wanted the book is there is a map on the inside, which is helpful in all the ways. And there are a little bit of a description of the hunter bloodlines at the beginning, but there's a lot of characters out of the gate. And my Greek god knowledge isn't the best, but one of the things that totally intrigued me about this is, back when I was a kid, we had like a big Greek god project in school. I always loved Athena. Here it comes. Because when I was a kid, people weren't named Audrey. Like it was Jen and Kim and Liz. And I was like, oh, a woman, a girl with a unique name with an A, and I connected with Athena and she was my favorite. And I got into Greek gods for a little while. And I was listening to an interview with Alexandra Bracken before I started to read the book, which was like the other tipping point for me. And she was talking about, you know, where she got inspiration from and how she did research for this, and like the depths of research that went into this book for her, which also, Write Her Head On, is fascinating to me. And I was like, wait a minute, that book sounds like super duper familiar to me. Apparently this is like a legendary book. This is the book that I had in the 3rd grade. I'm not even kidding. No, let me just cover it up because my name's in it. Yes, I rescued this book from my parents' basement years ago when they were doing a clean out. And I don't, at the time, like I was just like, oh, I want to keep this. Like, I don't want to let it go. And I'm so glad I did, because part of, while I was reading this and they were talking about different Greek gods, I would pull this out and then read the history, because I would be like, wait, who was Apollo? What was his thing? Like, you know, what was the power that they had? What was the deal with Artemis? Like, what's the connection between them? So it actually became like fascinating on multiple levels to me. But this is like a 500-page book. I was invested. I couldn't read it fast enough. I couldn't get back into it fast enough. I loved lore. I loved just everything about it. It takes place over, you know, those 7 days. We've got the time clock going, so it has that kind of crazy, you know, isolated, tense feeling to it, because we know we're on a clock. We know people are out to get us. Like I said, it's modern day New York. So it's also really fun how she played with this. It's just sort of like, this whole thing is going on, but a whole lot of people are just oblivious to it. Like, it's not like it's a well-known thing. It's like a secret society thing that goes on. So bad things are happening, but there's also just a bunch of people going about their business and a bunch of innocent bystanders who sort of get caught in the fray. I can't recommend this enough. If you like Greek gods, if you liked Hunger Games, if you like fantasy, if you're just looking to get lost in a world, I can see this being a movie. I can't stop talking about it. I'm telling my friends to read it. I'm telling you guys to read it. I just loved it. Totally took me by surprise. Could not have been more of a getting lost in a story feeling that I 100% needed. And I am super excited to read it again. I'm not gonna lie, because now that I know it all, I feel like going in it a second time, A, I'll pick up other things, and B, I can really just dive in and just enjoy it all over again. So loved it, loved it. And I finished the month with one of my most favorite authors, and it's One by One by Ruth Ware. And I loved it. I really, really did. And I've heard a lot of mixed bag on this one, but I just love Ruth Ware as a writer. It was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what I wanted. I talked about this in my Snowy Reads video as well, and it was just the vibe I was craving right now. So in this book, we follow a group of 10 work colleagues from this app called Snoop, which is like this music app. It's this tech company, and they have just gotten a deal or an offer for a big company to buy them out. And some of the founders are totally down with this because they're gonna make like billions of dollars, and some of the founders don't want to sell out, they want to go public. So there's a big debate between the group of them. And they have come up to this beautiful isolated chalet in the French Alps to kind of have a company retreat, kind of suss out like the pros and cons, and to vote on what they should do. And the hitch is that you've got 4 original founders, and then there's a woman named Liz, who, when the company was just sort of this nothing startup and they couldn't pay their bills or do anything, she was the sort of secretary or personal assistant to the top 2 founders. And they gave her a 2% share in the company, sort of as compensation when they couldn't pay her. And now her 2% is going to be the dividing choice or the decision point in whether they sell or whether they kind of stay. Everything starts out a little bit okay, but already we've got some tension. And they go and they ski, and they just sort of are trying to have this relaxing day, and somebody goes missing and an avalanche hits and all bets are off. And we get this from two different perspectives. So we get Liz's perspective, and then we get the perspective of a woman named Erin, who is one of the hosts at the chalet. So we have Erin and Danny, who is the chef, and then we have the 10 guests. And I just really enjoyed it. I just thought it was good tension. It was that creepy isolation feeling. So I've heard a lot of people liken this to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, and I'm pretty sure I was one of those people before I read it. And it's not. It's an isolated mystery. There's tons of those out there, but it's not the same book. It's not the same premise that brings them there. It's not the same things that happen. So don't compare it to that in that sense. Don't think you're gonna get that exact story, because you're not. But you definitely get that feeling of things go from bad to worse. Tensions just keep mounting. It's over a 4-day period, and it was just great fun. It was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I needed. It wasn't the most like intricately twist surprise kind of a book, but I also like don't need that and don't always want that. And I think what I really enjoy about Ruth Ware, and I do think where she does give winks and pays tribute to Agatha Christie, is that she plays fair with the reader. So yes, it was there all along. Yes, the clues were there. Yes, you could see why things did or didn't happen. And again, I just really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend it. She is a favorite author of mine, and I will auto-buy anything that she puts out. So that's gonna do it for the books I read in January. Let me know if you have read any of these, what your favorite book of the month was, what you're reading now. I need to pick up a new book. My head is in very different directions. I kind of want to read snowy stuff because it's snowing. I kind of want to get lost in a fast-paced book. I kind of want to slow it down a bit and not be in a fast-paced book. So I don't know what I'm going to read next, but when I do figure it out, I'll let you guys know. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out today, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody.